Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Anime Night in the Dojo. Today's featured show, Spy Family, Season 3.
Yep, Spy Family, Season 3, Episode 8. Welcome back to the dojo. I'm Ryu. Sage, we're back for more Anime Night in the dojo, and well, last week, Anya and Damien live in solidarity by having knot bombs strapped to their neck. That's where we're at. Also, a fairly brilliant plan by Becky. That was pretty impressive, but once again, we talked about how this was supposed to be teenagers and stuff like that, and kind of like the what could have been situation with some of these characters if they were actually like high schoolers and stuff like that. So that is what it is. It's that's probably one of the bigger like what ifs, like how these situations would be different if the author hadn't like last second changed it. I can't fathom just hard pivoting like that. You know what I mean? That had to be a real B. You know what I mean? So I hope they're satisfied with their choice. That's all I gotta say. Because I don't even know what to compare that to, honestly. That's friggin' hardcore. But as it stands right now, we have the bus jacking still in progress. As was mentioned, most of the other members of Red Circus have been executed for obvious reasons based on the time they live in and how they dealt with groups like that in situations like that in reality, our past. So it's unsurprising if they don't have anything to offer. Most terrorists are just done away with, you know what I mean, in situations like this, in scenarios like this kind of situation. And we talked about that last week as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the negotiations go, because you have the State Department that is looking for protecting Estonia on the whole. You know what I mean? And they're not going to sacrifice, the safety of the public just in general for a few children. But once again, we talked about that last week as well. It's like, it does matter who the children are in this case, because of what the more power that people can exert in this situation, like the Black Bells, they're one of the major, military weapons, dealers, that kind of thing. If even just the Black Bells came down on the government, that would be a pretty big deal, let alone every other kid who is tied to something fairly major. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, like, freaking, even if Desmond isn't the freaking
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister anymore, he's still a major politician. And freaking what's his face, the big kid, we found out apparently his dad is a general.
Yeah, that was the thing that like they showed when they first introduced him, like, and his dad was like basically freaking M. Bison or something.
Yeah, like his dad is also a fairly big deal and technically part of the government.
Yeah,
being a general.
So it's just one of those kind of things that it'll be interesting to see if the State Department is really like that, because if, as big picture as they are, you would think that if it was just like regular school children, and it's a terrible thing to say, to sacrifice kids at all, that's a horrendous thing to say, but just with the added weight of, hey, these are incredibly like wealthy and important people's children, and what they could potentially do to the country and the State Department if they their kids died on their watch. You know what I mean? I'm kind of surprised that their brass would be okay with letting those children die, especially. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's kind of like an interesting take on that whole scenario. Is just, you would think the State Department in this situation would be the ones that would be less inclined to storm the bus. So yeah, but either way, I think that Martha's gonna do a thing, because we've already established that she's probably ex-Special Forces and kind of a big deal. And she already kind of made that statement of like, yeah, I'm going to go handle this. So I assume she's going to handle part of this situation. And
yeah, she's probably going to be at least involved in handling the main bus while Yuri is dealing with the secondary bus.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I was going to mention was I assume we'll probably get like Yuri's bus will probably be secondary in a way, you know what I mean? But we'll still see what he does because obviously he's still insanely capable, even as ridiculous as he is. He's meticulous and has every trait that you want in a secret police guy. You know what I mean? And sometimes you have to tie him to a pole for his own good.
Yeah, that one trait that is kind of dubious about him, and that is just his freaking obsession with his sister.
Yeah, which, if "your" is in the word, he has the nervous tick. That was hilarious. I really hope they go back to that gag again. But either way, that being said, let's see what happens with this bus jacking. How the situation is resolved. What Anya attempts to get herself killed somehow, I'm sure. We talked about that one as well. What random boneheaded thing is she going to do next? Trying to be like Papa. So, either way, this should be a pretty interesting situation. So, people on Patreon, we'll see you on the other side of the edit for the timer reaction, and people on YouTube, see you on the other side for the discussion and review. So, here goes something. Well, alrighty then, there you guys have it. If it wasn't already painfully obvious, Becky's dad is, well, that kind of character. Gotta appreciate that classic animation of the arms flailing. You gotta appreciate that one when it's used. It's been a minute, but I think the last time we personally saw it was when Darkness did it in that GIF that I made of Darkness. That was hilarious too. But anyway, we talked about it a little bit at the end of the reaction, and I really don't want to get into the super political nature of everything in this, but just like Lloyd's backstory, and we talked about it as much as I wanted to in Lloyd's backstory and that kind of thing, and it just comes down to all the politicking and just, you know, how situations in countries and governments and how those kind of things can affect each individual's lives. You know what I mean? We kind of had something to that end in like Shield Hero and stuff like that in this season, in the previous season that we just got through a couple months ago. And it's always a hot button topic, obviously, and we stay away from that here for obvious reasons because we're just trying to have fun on the channel and stuff like that. But they're very real scenarios, and it's interesting to see somebody from Japan, you know, that came out with this, but it's not like they're incapable of reading world history, you know what I mean? And just being able to kind of put into context how certain countries in the past have gone about the way they handle inequality and things like that. And it's always something that's very difficult to talk about because a lot of people see it as, you know, something easy to fix when it's really not at the end of the day. So I don't know. It's one of those things that you just have to kind of look at and how each individual deals with it. And obviously, like somebody like this Billy character who lost his daughter to, you know, peaceful protests and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And obviously, we just have to take their word for it. You know what I mean? There were a lot of peaceful protests across the ages that were responded to by violence from the government, whatever country it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not just only this country did it, or this region, or whatever. You know what I mean? It happened in every country. You know what I mean? It happened in all parts of our world, that kind of thing. And it's not just one place that this happened. You know what I mean?
I mean, there were also plenty of peaceful protests that involved guillotining nobility.
Yeah. So it's there's always, you know, two sides to all of that kind of thing. And everybody has their motivations. Losing a family member or loved one is obviously one of the highest things up there. You know what I mean? And again, I wouldn't really see Billy just in general as a bad guy. You know what I mean? It's just at a certain point, everybody has their breaking point, and they're willing to throw all of it away to seek some sort of what they see as justice. You know what I mean?
He's a victim of circumstance.
Yeah. So either way, again, we talked about it during the episode a little bit there too, as well as like this was probably the best use of Anya's telepathy to date, because just getting him to think about his daughter was able to give her complete insight into how she could potentially talk him down, even if that's not what her plan was. You know what I mean? She understands enough from Lloyd that if you throw the person's ideals back at them, that kind of thing, that would probably be more than enough to deal with the situation. So she just copied everything his daughter said. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like she's not smart enough to really know the why, but she's just gotten progressively better at imitating people. So she's just imitating Lloyd in this situation and using the information she has on the guy to try to manipulate him.
Yep.
She doesn't have any idea really how it works or what she's really even doing. She's just, what would Papa do?
Yep. And she also used his quote as to what his motivations as to why he's doing all the work that he's done in his career. So that was pretty heavy in the emotion department. This was a very emotional episode across the board for just everything, that all the subjects they were touching on, stuff like that. Obviously, you know, we talked about the secret police and what they were potentially wanting to do and stuff like that, and they did touch on it a little bit. Like they referred to, I believe it was Section 1 was getting cold feet, and that was probably their way of saying, well, Section 1's kind of hesitant about storming a bus with all these high-profile kids in it. You know what I mean? And even there at the end, when they were going to send in like the SWAT team or the Special Forces or whatever those guys were, they literally said, and think about this for a second. They know that there's only 3 people in there, right? So at the end of the day, it's not like you're taking down a full squad or something like that. You're taking down 3 people in a confined space, obviously, but it's just like, yeah, keep civilian casualties to a minimum, but they didn't say try to avoid it at all. You know what I mean? They basically just said collateral damage is expected, don't really worry about it at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So it's pretty obvious that they work in sections. You know what I mean? Based on how the chain of command works for their system.
Yeah, I believe Yuri's Section 1. I'm pretty sure it got said at some point or another. But yeah, we don't really know how many sections they have, or this is the first time we've really got any sort of real diversification between them, of like them operating under basically entirely different chains of command.
Right. So that's kind of something interesting to think about. But you know, to that end, Yuri's team handled this situation with 5 shots and then a 6th going into Yuri. Which, I will say this, that guy is using something fairly akin to a classic AK-47, which is an assault rifle, and he took this guy down with 1 shot. He pulled the trigger 1 time. You know what I mean? So, 5 people, 5 shots, incredibly efficient. So, that's pretty impressive. And then Yuri taking 1 for the team, and the narrator having to chime in to give that little quip about Yuri was friggin' hilarious, and you gotta appreciate everything about it. Didn't even get to save the little Chihuahua girl, which... Have we seen a Chihuahua in the show? But I guess if that dog exists in their world, they would just be aware of it, even if they don't have any in their country, right? Just because we don't have, like, you know, lions native to North America or whatever, you know, like the African kind, doesn't mean that we're not aware that they exist, kind of situation. So
yeah.
Either way, that just a little aside with Yuri was great. That was about the amount of the episode that I figured they would allocate to him. So that was cool that they dealt with that situation in the way they did. And you know, Henderson taking 1 for the team, unsurprising. Again, being tased can have very negative effects on you. You know what I mean? And especially, I will say this: these are first generation tasers.
Yeah.
Because Martha does point out to Anya that this is a new like invention by Black Bell Industries. So whatever Billy had was probably some kind of like crude beta version of a taser. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it probably didn't have the dialed in voltage to take somebody down without leaving like potentially serious, at least short term repercussions if you didn't get medical attention like they had to get for that teacher. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So early tasers were that, like any kind of early design of anything like that is, you know, you never know what, you know, getting too much voltage in this case, very bad for you. You know?
Yeah, electricity is very dangerous. They have to really friggin' dial in tasers to be non-lethal.
Yep. Let's not forget, 70% of our body is water. You know what doesn't mix with water? Electricity.
Yeah, even with how like meticulously like they freaking regulate the electricity in a taser can still totally kill you.
Yep. So, either way, we got some elegant spam too. That was fantastic. Just some of the other like random bits in this were, you know, the jumping to conclusion. It's like, out of everybody on this bus and potentially in Eden College, Anya is probably the least privileged, and she's still like upper middle class based on if Lloyd's position was what it was, and you know, Yor's position was just working at town hall. You know what I mean? They'd still be fairly well off. You know what I mean? So the whole thing of like him like breaking down and thinking, oh man, Eden College kids are starving immediately is kind of like that knee-jerk reaction of that adds to the like the comedic factor of like, you know, this guy is not a criminal mastermind. He's just a guy who's grieving and lost his daughter and wants some semblance of revenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's just some guy who's pissed off because his daughter got killed. Meanwhile, like he said, he hasn't been in the country for a while. And freaking Anya's whole spiel there is like she's trying to protect everyone there, implying that everyone is suffering.
Yeah. So that is what it is. But yeah, going forward here, it will be interesting to see like what the implications for this, like especially I like this photo here. He's obviously military. You know what I mean? And even as ex-military, you know, we see how a lot of like lower ranking military are treated, especially in America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, the way this whole thing was like framed is like he's ex-military and his wife gets killed in the war, and so he tries to keep his daughter from being involved in any sort of conflict.
Yep. Which is a completely reasonable stance to take in living in the situation that they are. So it's a very difficult situation, and it's I appreciate the author for touching on these very real subjects, like the background with Lloyd that we had with him and Frankie. Even that discussion, very real, very hitting home, that kind of thing. This situation, you know what I mean? To like a lesser extent, the that smear journalist from season 1, you know what I mean? While he was going about it the wrong way, he even still had his motivations, and that were like reasonable based on everything that was going on around him. But I mean, so it's hitting a lot of big hot button topics that you wouldn't expect to have to think about in 2025. But once again, I'm just telling you guys which way the wind is blowing. You know what I mean? And that's all I'll really say about that without getting hyper political here. So it's kind of hard to dance around the subject when a couple of these episodes really try to drive that point home. And this is just trying to like show off like an era in the past, you know what I mean? Like pseudo Cold War, that kind of thing. But well, that's kind of where we're headed back to. You know what I mean? So it's kind of spooky to think about. But either way, the situation was resolved, and Martha did do a thing. She, not unlike Makoto in Campfire Cooking that we just did, she was the mysterious Graybler.
Yeah, we got basically confirmed here that she's ex-military, which we figured was going to be the case, seeing as, you know, she's the, like, butler bodyguard of the big military company.
Yeah. And you can see it right here, right? Yeah, right there. It wasn't a blur. She jumped on that guy's head. I forgot that's what it was. Fully freaking Mario'd that guy.
And apparently she has some sort of past with Henderson as well.
That, or, I mean, you know, she probably just knows him from the school, I guess you could argue. But they framed it like she knew him for a long time.
Yeah, like, her running into him at the school occasionally is friggin' to be expected, but it definitely came off as more of, like, they have some sort of history together and knew each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was earlier in the episode here, like, yeah, this right here. It's like, what are you doing here? And I believe she referred to him by first name, not Master Henderson, I believe. She called him by his first name, which is apparently Henry?
Yeah, she also calls him... She also just refers to him as the old man.
Right. So, potentially former Eden graduate. Who knows? But, yeah, so... There's a lot of stuff with this that was fairly interesting to talk about and discuss, but again, without getting super hyper political, there's not really much more we can go into. Anya developing her power even more, being able to be as selective as she is. It's nice to see her making progress with that, so that's cool. Just a little bit more on each of like the tertiary characters, like Becky's dad. Don't got anything on her mom. Not that it's super important, but you know.
Based on what little we have seen of her family dynamic, and the fact that what's-her-face turned out to be Damien's mom instead, chances are Becky's mom's probably just out of the picture entirely.
Right. So, either way, another solid episode, you know. Lots of heavy things going on with this, but, you know, sometimes you have to do this to make it feel more real and compelling and stuff like that, and it's done a good job at doing exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta establish stakes. Like, we've been talking about the whole situation of, like, the whole way, like, the situation that the country's in and everything like that, and so we need to actually have occasional things like this that happen relating to the situation that the country's in. We can't just purely go slice of life.
Yep. So, either way, that's all I got for this week. Based on the little quick preview that we get in this show, I'm sure some pretty serious hilarity is going to ensue next time. So, probably going back to the more lighthearted nature, obviously. But you know.
Yeah, I mean, it from that brief glimpse in the preview and from what we know of how, like, the rest of this stuff works, the fact that Henderson was on the bus means he's probably going to friggin' push for Damien and Anya getting Estella.
Yeah.
And then Anya's probably going to, once again, start trying to lord over everyone the fact that she still has the most Stellas out of the class. Right.
Which, I don't know if we've gotten a count in that in a while, but I know Damien got one for, like, academics at the end of in the middle of last season, something like that. I know a couple of the other kids have gotten at least one, but there hasn't really been a huge amount of time for establishing, like, anybody else getting multiple, because it's still pretty early in the school year.
Yeah, she was the first one to get Estella, and we probably would have heard something if someone else had managed to pass her up at this point and get a second Stella already.
Yep. So, anyway, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, people of YouTube, beyond whoever watching, as always, we appreciate you stopping by and hanging with us here in the dojo for more Anime Night in the Dojo. This was Spy Family, Season 3, Episode 8. So, we'll just have to see if Lloyd passes it out again. Gotta be rule of threes with that one, right? And I'm sure Wise and Garden might have something to say about situations like this at some point. Yeah, at the very least, Wise. And the fact that, you know, Anya was almost, you know, killed. You know what I mean? So, maybe this will be a catalyst of Lloyd not being sent on 900 missions a week. So, anyway, everybody, have a good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is for you. Have a good one. See you next time.
Hey everyone, Victoria here. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pushing those like and subscribe buttons. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you again in the future.